Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. This is Liaquat Zaman, and we are continuing with Crash Course, and we're doing Madhabs. So, if you remember last time, guys, we discussed lots of things we went through. We talked about Madhabs and the fiqh, and how in the early years, this idea of fiqh and understanding what the religion was about, there was practical application, there was verbal instructions that were given. You had like Hajj, how do you perform the Hajj? The Quran, what the Quran says, and then what the practice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, and then there were those things which were not explicitly mentioned, right? And then you had scholars who scattered throughout the earth. They went to different places around the world, and they had different approaches or slightly varying approaches in how they used to understand. So we said like there was like the Quran, and then you look at the practice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then you look at agreement of the community of the scholars. So you kind of looked at various things of how, things worked. So let's just go back to this then. So you had the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is the messenger now. So Allah directly, he sends a revelation to him, and now everyone around him now is just learning about the religion. They're learning it, men and women and children. It's like everyone is absorbing, they're like taking in what he's teaching them. And so you have this kind of community who are preserving Islam, what the instructions of Islam, they're preserving it in their practice, effectively. So this was a very powerful way of how Islam was being preserved in the early days, right? So you had, imagine the ones I'm writing in blue. These were those people, those early Muslims who met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So their prayer, right? So things like prayer, 5 times a day you're going to be praying, that was being recorded. You had things like fasting, that was being done, everyone's communal doing it. You had things like Hajj, you had other stuff as well, etc, that was being practiced. And then you had this practice that was being passed down, right? So it's been passed down by people. So now this is like the second generation now, the ones that didn't get to meet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but they got to meet those people who were at his time, right? So they get to meet those people who are at his time, the Sahaba. So the blue ones, we call them the companions, the Sahaba, and then you have the red ones, which are known as the Tabi'een, right? And the blue ones are called the Sahaba. Sahaba simply means companions. So they were known for being companions. Sahaba. Right? So they learned now. They're practicing, right? So as time goes by, wherever the people are, they really are interested in understanding this religion now. They want to kind of understand, right? I know how to pray, basically. So for example, like I know the kind of like the structure of prayer. I know that you have to, like I mentioned to you, if you guys remember last time, I drew for you guys and I said, you know how to pray. You stand and then you bow and then you prostrate and then you sit down, and there's these number of units that you pray, and there's certain times in the day. So most of the things about prayer, people got, they kind of understood it, right? Because it was like, first of all, when the Prophet ﷺ, he taught the prayer times, for instance, prayer times, it was like, right, there's 5 prayer times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How do you work out those prayer times? Well, the way that we're going to work them out is, for instance, we're going to draw our day line there, and then we're going to say, okay, so at sunrise, so here is sunrise and here is sunset, right? So rise and set. So this is sunset, you can say, and actually I've did it in the wrong place there, so never mind, let's just change that to number 4, let's change that to number 5. So here's where sunset is. So and in the middle you have like sun at the highest point. So let's just put that over there, number 2 over there, right? So you have the sun in the highest place. So this sun goes up and then the sun goes down, right? So the salat times are based around this now. So you have like before sunrise, you have Fajr, Fajr, and in the midday, after the sun reaches the highest point, you have something called Zuhr. And then you have right just before the sun sets in this kind of area, you have something called Asr, right, late afternoon. And then after the sun sets, you have Maghrib, and then when it gets dark, you have Isha, right? Those are like the 5 times that they've kind of like they've got. And this was from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He practiced this and he did it every single day, and so they got the idea of it, and he taught them, right, these are the times. Now, for instance, there are some times which are basically, we don't exactly have an agreement exactly what time it ends and what time it starts. For instance, like the Asr time is one. So if I do it in a different color. So there's like a difference of opinion among scholars exactly what time does Asr start and thus what time does Zuhr end, right? Because like each Salat time is, you can say, from one time to the other. So like Asr all the way till Maghrib, Maghrib till Isha. This is the only time that you have over here. I'll just do this like this, which is like a no Salat time, right? So there's no prayers at this time, no like official prayers at this time. You can pray optional prayers, but there's no official prayer at this time. But the question is here, what time does Asr start? Well, the scholars had a difference of opinion. So for instance, some of them said that the Asr starts if you have an object in the ground. Let's say you have an object in the ground, a stick. They say that if the stick becomes the size of 1, so let's say for example that's 1 meter, the length of the stick becomes 1 meter on the ground, that's the time Asr starts. So the sun is over here, the shadow is over here. So if the shadow reaches one length of the object, that's when Asr starts. Others said no, Asr actually starts when the length is double, the shadow is double the size of the length. So the length is 1, so then the shadow has to be 1 plus 1, has to be 2. That's when Asr starts. So this was something that they differed in, and the reason simply because they don't have anything categorical of exactly what time the Asr prayer starts. So they have categorical, they know when the Fajr starts, right, when the whiteness appears on the horizon. They know when Zuhr is, when the sun kind of moves away from the zenith. And they also know when Maghrib, because right after. So they don't know the Asr, and that's one. And then the second one is the Isha. Exactly what time does Isha start and what time does Maghrib end, right? So again, this is a different opinion. The difference is only, like, you can say maybe half an hour to about 40 minutes maybe difference between the two opinions, right? But there is obviously a difference, right? So why does this difference come about? Because there were certain things that were being passed down that weren't categorically defined. And so the later scholars, they found that, well, I have to kind of like try to figure out how I'm going to do this, right? How we're going to work out what Asr is. So they used their research to come to a conclusion. So some of the scholars came to the conclusion, for example, like in the Shafi school and the Maliki school and many of the schools, and even Imam Abu Yusuf and Muhammad, most of the scholars, a lot of the scholars, you can say, took this opinion that Asr starts when one shadow. Whereas Imam Abu Hanifa, for example, like Abu Hanifa, one of his opinions, he's got several opinions. One is over here as well. But he also has another opinion, which is, and this is the common one that many people today, they practice in the mosques, right? They pray the Asr slightly delayed from the Shafi and Maliki and Hanbalis. So this is one of the reasons why there is a difference of opinion, because when the companions were learning this, they didn't really kind of consider there to be like a specific time when the Asr starts. They knew what the time was, but they didn't define it, they didn't note it down, they didn't record it exactly, and there was a difference of opinion. So this is why later scholars that came, so I mean you got this kind of like later generation that came after these guys, right? If I were to draw them, these ones are the ones that only met the red ones, right? They didn't meet the blue ones, right? So these are known as the Taba' Tabi'i, the followers of the ones that preceded the Tabi'in, came after them, right? The Taba' Tabi'in. Okay, so this is something that began to happen. Now, whilst all of this was happening, right, where do we get evidence? Where do we get evidence that this is allowed? So what the scholars said was basically you had an incident that took place in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if I draw a timeline for you guys, that's a timeline. So if I was to say, for example, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was at the age of 40 there, and this is 0 when the scale started, and this is 63 there, right? So this is where, so roughly about here, right? Roughly about here in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was an incident took place. Basically, they had to go to this city or this village, which was known as Qurayza, Banu Qurayza, the tribe of Banu Qurayza. And they had prayed their Zuhr. So they prayed their Zuhr, which was this prayer here. And they had to get to Banu Qurayza. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, no one prays Asr except in Banu Qurayza. Right? That's what he's told them. So companions, they set off now. So they're going. Let me just, there. So companions are basically on their way. And as they're going on their way, right, you can imagine companions setting off. And they're going from, this is Medina. Al-Medina, in English, Medina. And they're going to the tribe of B&Q, Banu Qurayza. So what happens is right in the middle, Maghrib's about to start. Right, so the sun is about to set. Now remember, what did the Prophet say? The Prophet, peace be upon him, said that make sure you pray your Asr there. So the companions split. Right, some of them, they actually prayed their Asr. They prayed Asr. Right, they prayed their Asr there, and others, they actually prayed later on. Okay, so others, so some of them prayed there, but then others, they prayed late. In other words, they prayed outside the time. So they prayed later and they prayed outside the time. They prayed the Asr. Both groups went to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they told the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, right, we had a dispute here. Some of us said, let's pray, and others said, no, we're not going to pray because you said to delay it. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not tell any one of them off. In other words, both did fine, because this group here, they actually acted upon this literal statement, right? And this group here, what they done was, they actually said the Prophet didn't intend for us to pray Asr there. He was metaphorically speaking. It was a metaphorical statement, meaning he was saying to us, quickly get there. So sometimes we say to people, try to get there as quick as possible. So he was metaphorically speaking. So they said what he meant was pray your Asr on time, but get there as quick as possible. And by saying pray your Asr there, that's what he meant. So these two groups, you can say both of them tried to do what is known as ijtihad. Okay, ijtihad. Ijtihad simply means to put all your effort and knowledge into trying to come out with an answer. That's basically what it is. And these guys were the best guys for that, because they learned from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was teaching them of how to get to their conclusions. So this is why you had some of these issues that arose. So in other words, the time of Asr having a difference of opinion is simply because, not because of this incident, but I showed you this incident because I want to show you guys how differences of opinions arise, and they existed even in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, now because of this, there came a split, right? So there was a big split amongst the scholars into a approach. There was the approach which was known as the reasoning approach. And there was the approach which was known as the literal approach. Right? You had the reasoning approach and you had the literal approach, just like these two groups here. So you had, this was the group for the reasoning. They tried to find a reason to justify. And this was the group that just literally acted upon what they were told. That's all. So these two groups now would have, lots of differences in how they would approach certain issues, right? And for example, like we'll say something like, what breaks your wudu? Okay, what kind of things break your wudu? Right, so your wudu, what kind of things break your wudu? So one of the groups, they said, well, whatever the Quran says, and the Quran says when you go toilet, so that simply means anything that comes out the two passages, urine and defecation, right, feces. That's one of the group. They took the literal meaning. And the other group, they said, well, see, Allah in the Quran, he says go toilet, but what he is saying to us is when you go to the toilet, impurity comes out your body. Impurity. And therefore, the general ruling is that wudu breaks with any impurity coming out of your body. So if impurity comes out of anywhere, so for instance, like if impurity comes out your passages, or impurity comes out, for example, like in the form of blood, or impurity comes out in the form of a lot of vomit, all of these will break your wudu, right? Your ablution. Whereas the other group said, no, we're actually just going to stick to what the Quran says, toilet. And the Quran does not mention, or the narrations don't explicitly mention about blood and vomit in that sense. So blood does not break your wudu, nor does vomit break your wudu. So anyway, that's part 2. And inshallah, I'm thinking about making a part 3 as well. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys think I should make a part 3. Part 3 is going to be a bit more about this difference, this reasoning group and literal group, and tell you about who was part of the reasoning ones, the literal ones, and how it later on developed. So today we learnt about how the Prophet ﷺ, through his practice, spread many things, and people learnt it from him, and then there became differences of opinion, like the Asr prayer, what time it starts, and about the Banu Qurayza, and about this issue of ijtihad and reasoning and literal approaches. So thank you very much. Jazakumullah khair. And thank you to all my patrons for all your support. If you guys want to become patrons, support me on this channel, check out my link in the description. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much to all my patrons. Jazakumullah khair. Alhamdulillah. With all of your support, with all of your efforts and your encouragement and motivation, alhamdulillah, this channel has reached where it has today. And there's so much left that I want to do, and there's editing, and there's trying to start new projects as well and get other people involved so that I can focus on producing content. So if you guys want to become patrons and you want to support this channel, then check out the link in the description. Inshallah, there's also videos available for those who are patrons in the Patreon itself that I don't put on my normal YouTube channel. So if you guys want to check that out, inshallah, links in the description, like I said. And jazakumullah khair, share it with other people. Let me know what you guys think as well. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.